mentioned the difference between autonomy supportive parenting and the directive or controlling parenting.
Hmm.
Parents might be listening and not
Hmm.
quite understand the difference
Right.
between
Right.
the two, because some parents might say, oh, but if I give up some level of control, I'm going to be considered a negligent parent, or
Right.
I'm
Right.
going to be
Right.
considered a permissive parent.
Right.
And if
Right.
I give up control, then my child is just going to go through the worst, don't have any form of structure and
Right.
discipline and all of that. So, what am I supposed to do? So, when parents hear that,
Yeah.
autonomy supportive, okay, so I'm giving up control. If I give up control, then what exactly is this compared to the controlled directive form of
Yeah.
parent?
So autonomy supportive parenting really just means that you're giving your kids some space to have some control over some areas of their life. And it doesn't and this is, it's pretty common for people to think in terms of, okay, you're all this or you're all that. And being I have never been as strict as a parent as when I really went all in on autonomy supportive parenting, because autonomy supportive parenting, you give kids really, really clear expectations, and when they don't meet those expectations, you help them feel the logical consequences of not going through with not fulfilling those expectations. And it's really hard because I have to let my kid, fail stuff, and I have to let my kid sort of have to take the consequences when he doesn't meet a certain expectation. But what I'm allowing him to do is have some control over how he gets there. And I think a lot the reason it's so important to give kids some autonomy is that kids are going to demand it from us anyway. Part of the process of being an adolescent, for example, is individuating and pulling away from us, and having some control over some elements of your life is really important. And we know that kids of really controlling parents lie, or they're more deceptive. They lie to their parents
Yeah, it's
more,
very
because if
sneaky.
we
Mhm.
don't give them some autonomy over their lives, they're going to take it, often through deception. So, and when I talk to kids about this, it's really funny. I'll say something like, you're lying about weird things, like telling your parents you're at the coffee shop when you're really just down the street at the sandwich shop. Why lie about that? And they'll say things like, well, they're on top of me all the time, and I just need something that's for myself, and I just need a little bit of space to breathe. And so remembering that, if I want my kid to be honest with me, then giving them a little more autonomy is important. So autonomy supportive just means that you're giving your kids some control over some aspects of their life, increasingly more as they get older, obviously developmentally appropriate. Directive parenting, which is a term that is used a lot in the research, means that you're constantly there with the instructions, like, okay, first do this, okay, next do that, okay, no, do it that way. Like if you're watching your kid load the dishwasher or something like that, and instead of letting them figure out a little bit what works. And think about when your kid would play, your toddler or your infant would play with like a toy where they had to stack different shapes or something like that. Letting them sort of work through that is a really important part of that learning process. And if we just give them the answer, they're not going to learn from that process. So the children of directive parents tend to have less comfort with frustration, because they're so used to someone giving them the next instruction before they even need it sometimes. And then what you're talking about, permissive parenting or laissez-faire parenting or free, whatever it is, that's not at all what I'm talking about. I know a lot because I talk a lot about substance abuse, and permissive parenting is a risk factor for substance abuse. That's not at all what I'm talking about. Those are parents who just sort of walk away and say, hey, figure it out for yourself. I'm not
Right.
even going to be here. Autonomy supportive parenting, you're there, you're especially there emotionally and from a supportive position, but you're not giving them the answers, and you're not giving them directions, and you're not on top of it constantly telling them what to do next. That's the difference between those parenting styles.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Because parents, it's interesting what you describe, because you can see where even a baby has this need for autonomy and to
Yeah.
try and
Yeah.
try again. And somehow some parents can allow their children, their babies, to try again without this constant directive. There are others that you mentioned, the studies in your book, where you can tell the parents from a young age, when they have a baby, the babies are the ones with the directive parents are the ones who,
Right.
when they are left alone, they won't explore and all of that, compared to the autonomy supported parents. Their babies are more likely to explore when they are left alone
Right.
for a little bit. So it's interesting that sometimes parents can do that um, when their
Well,
babies.
and it's also not just that they'll explore, but babies of autonomy supportive parents will stick with a frustrating task long enough to finish it, whereas the kids of the directive parents won't be able to finish the task. And that's for an educate for me as a teacher, that is key right there, because I need kids to be able to stick with the task long enough to finish it and not just give up. That's going to be the difference between learning in my classroom and not really learning in my classroom.
And then a parent listening might then say, so what are some of the key characteristics of supportive parenting, autonomy supportive parenting?
Hmm.
So that one of them is, clear expectations
Hmm.
within boundaries. What are some of the
Hmm.
other um, highlights that you can maybe give to parents for them? Because they might be listening
Right.
to a checklist.
Right.
Oh, um,
Right.
okay, let me see. Am I one of those directive parents?
Right.
Parents, or am I one of those who support my child's autonomy?
Well, and that's why actually in Gift of Failure, I have my editor kept coming back and she kept saying like, no, make it clear. No, give a script. No, explain, break it down. So in Gift of Failure, I very specifically say, a directive parent might say this, whereas an autonomy supportive parent might tweak it and say this. Autonomy supportive parenting, the best way, whenever I'm doing a speaking event, I always want parents to leave feeling empowered, not like, oh, here's all the things I'm doing wrong. I want people to leave feeling empowered, like they can walk out of there with something they can use right away. And the two things that I think are most important are to focus on for yourself and for your children, more on the process of learning, doing, becoming, making, practicing, as opposed to the end product.
Mhm.
And that's sort of the process that's the thing I have to remind myself of like every single day, because I still have two kids who are in the process of becoming adults. And I have to constantly think, okay, stop, 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 stop. Do I want this thing right in front of me or right in front of my kid to be done perfectly right in this moment? Or do I want him to be the kind of person who can do it himself next time?
Yes.
Do I want him to have the resources to figure out how to handle this if I wasn't here next time?
Mhm.
That has to be my constant sort of, okay, Jess, focus more on the process, less on the product, more on the process, less on the product. And if that means that I go to the teachers when the kids were younger, I often had to go to the teachers and say, look, I do not use the parent portal. I will not log on and check their grades constantly because I am more focused on the process of what he's learning, talking to him about it, and making sure that that learning process is continual.
Yeah.
So focus more on process, less on product. And remember that this is a long haul job. Like we're not if we live in the emergencies every day, we're going to get stuck in that emergency mode where everything has to be perfect in this moment. This soccer practice has to be perfect. Sorry, football practice has to be perfect. This homework has to be perfect. This, recital has to be perfect. But if we're thinking more long term and thinking about where we want our kid to be in 1 month, in 6 months, in a year, do I want the kind of kid who's perfect right here in this moment and is really suffering under the pressure or really suffering from not feeling love for who they are or is sick from the anxiety? Or do I want a healthy kid in 6 months who might take a little bit longer to get there, but will get there eventually? And more importantly, will get there eventually on their own, as opposed to with me hovering right over them, telling them how to do it every step of the way. So
Yes.
process over product. Remember that this is a long haul job.